Jessica Frost Ballas here from All the Sparkle, and I'm so excited to be guesting for lawnfawn today. I've used the magic color slider in a slightly unconventional way to create a magical crystal ball with a hidden message. So let's get started. First, I created my crystal ball background by scribbling Copic markers onto a piece of Yupo paper. I used R32, R85, and RV19 and just applied them in a diagonal pattern. Then I took a water brush filled with isopropyl alcohol and blended the inks together. I toyed with the idea of creating a wavy pattern, but decided against it and went back to my diagonal lines. And as you can see, it easily blends back with the application of alcohol. I also added a little metallic brass ink to the panel and blended that in as well. Then I set it aside to dry thoroughly. Once it was dry, I die cut it with the slider tab of the Magic Color slider set. Next, I stamped the fortune teller Tabby onto white cardstock with Copic friendly ink and then die cut it with the pocket portion of the Magic Color slider die. I also die cut the center of the crystal ball at the same time. Then I colored my kitty using Copic markers. I'll include a list of the colors I used in the accompanying blog post. Next, I blended a panel of white cardstock with distress oxide ink. I started in the center with Stormy Sky, and then blended it out with Faded Jeans, Chipped Sapphire, and Black Soot. I splattered the panel with water and shimmer spray and then added flicks of white acrylic paint to create lots of shimmery stars. While that was drying, I stamped the kitty onto masking paper, fussy cut him, and then placed him over the colored image. I masked off the top of the stamped image and then I blended Stormy Sky and Faded Jeans Distress Oxide ink over the panel. I decided it was getting a little dark around the cat, so I ended up adding a little white pigment ink right around the edges of the cat to brighten things up. I added a few splatters of water and shimmer spray to the panel and let it dry. Once it was dry, I removed the mask and used Copic markers to color any areas that were accidentally covered by my mask. When my full blended panel was dry, I die cut it with the snowy backdrop and backed it with sunflower cardstock to create a starry night sky instead of a snowy night sky. Then I realized I hadn't finished coloring my fortune-telling cat and finished coloring his tablecloth with matching yellow stars. Next, it was assembly time. I folded the pocket along the middle score line and used my bone folder to go over the edges. Then I applied my powder tool to the cut edges of the magic color slider. This just helps everything move a little smoother. I tucked the notch of the slider tab into the slider pocket and pulled it through carefully. The first time it moves a little stiffly, but the more you play with it, the more easily it moves. You can really see how that powder tool helps move things along. Then I decided I wanted the crystal ball to have the same background, even when the slider tab was pulled completely out. So I took a leftover scrap of the Yupo paper, trimmed it down and adhered it to the inside of the slider pocket. As long as the scrap is as long as the pocket itself, it shouldn't catch on the slider tab. Next, I placed the pocket in my MISTI and lined the sentiment up on the inside of the crystal ball. I originally tried stamping with regular black ink, but realized it wouldn't quite be dark enough on the Yupo paper. So I stamped it again with VersaFine and heat embossed it with clear embossing powder for a bolder finish. To finish my magic color slider, I die cut the U-shaped tab and applied thin lines of score tape to both sides of the tab. I removed the adhesive backing from one side of the tab and carefully adhered it to the inside of my pocket, making sure to keep it right up against the edge. Then I placed the slider tab inside the pocket, made sure it wasn't touching the edges of the tab, then removed the rest of the adhesive backing and carefully closed the pocket like I was closing a book. Now the slider tab moves smoothly to create that swirly crystal ball effect and reveals that cheery sentiment. I die cut the pull tabs from the Magic Color slider set with sunflower cardstock and adhered them to the slider tab. Then I used foam mounting tape to adhere the slider to a mat of sunflower cardstock. I adhered the snowy backdrop to the sunflower cardstock and then adhered that panel to a top folding card base. I stamped the rest of the sentiment from Fortune Teller Tabby onto sunflower cardstock with VersaFine and heat embossed it with clear embossing powder. Then I trimmed it down to thin labels. I decided to give my scene a more magical effect and die cut a few clouds from the puffy cloud borders with pixie dust sparkle cardstock. I adhered one to the snowy backdrop panel and then adhered the smaller cloud over my magic color slider to ground my fortune teller's table. I adhered the sentiment to the slider tab, and then adhered the slider to the background panel. I also added an extra little cloud die to the background panel to give my clouds a more finished look. I also added a little gold and craft twine to make the pull tab easier to pull. Next, I die cut the snowy backdrop panel from sunflower cardstock and adhered some of the stars to the slider. Off camera, I added a few accents to the cat and slider with a white gel pen to finish the card. And that's it! I love how the crystal ball seems to swirl with pink and gold as you move the slider, and I hope you enjoyed my tutorial. Thanks so much for watching, and big thanks to Kelly and lawnfawn for inviting me to guest today. Have a fantastic day and happy crafting! Bye!